My name is Todd Crapper.
My name is Nick Dume.
And we are here to play some High Plains Samurai. So, for starters, Nick, who exactly are you playing? What is his name and where is he from?
Well, his name is Lucky Lu. He is from Hunan. He's a bodyguard, or an ex-bodyguard at that, Lucky Lu.
Yeah, and in Hunan, the former bodyguards were known as the watchdogs, and they were the ones who enforced the warlord grandfather's will.
Of course.
But since then, he has retired and moved on to become a farmer.
Okay.
But from what you have mentioned before, it is without his family, and why would that be?
Well, they're in the mines. Old man Grandpa always shoves anybody of age who can work the mine shaft into the mine. I, being the watchdog, or bodyguard in this case as well, have the lucky...
Like the fortune, the fortune in quotation marks.
To be able to not work the mine and instead retire a little bit early with my own ranch, as long as I give a lot of my proceeds to, of course, Grandpa.
Okay. And basically just waiting for that opportunity when your family can be released and actually be with you, so the three of you could be at peace, raising crops, and basically living the peaceful life that you have always dreamed of.
That Lou has always dreamed of.
Okay. So, what are the potentials that you are going to be using today?
I'm going to be using Patience, which is at a D6.
Okay. And then you've also got...
Sharpshooter.
Okay. And that one's listed at a D8.
Yes, sir. And
what are the resources you are going to use for this scene?
Well, I'm going with the deed to my farm. I think that's a safe bet here. Mm-hmm. And I'm using that to get a better difficulty. I'm a drinker. Unfortunately, Lou is not so lucky these days with that. And he has since then taken a rice wine, that is. And I'll take a difficulty up on that. And he can't be found without his lucky, trusty six-shooter.
Okay. Perfect. And then what is your overall motivation and your hindrance?
My overall motivation, I'd say, is my farm, the defense of my farm and my family. Mm-hmm. And my hindrance is, of course, he depends on whiskey.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Alrighty then. So... the main goal for this scene, this is going to be a 3-part story that we are going to tell, and the goal for the first scene is that grandfather approaches Lou with an offer to, quote-unquote, purchase his land, and Lou is going to respond as Lou only sees fit.
Okay.
So here we go. So we are going to begin here with a game of High Plains Samurai, and this is going to be the opening shot. As the camera fades up from black, there is only the sound of wind and almost shrapnel pieces of sand. It's kind of like just battering our ears. And as we begin to see what lies before us, all we see is a sandstorm. There is just almost a wall of brown. And as the camera begins to push its way through, and begins to cut in, we begin to make off just towards the lower left of the screen. There is kind of like just a black shadowy domicile of some kind. And as it goes just a little deeper and a little deeper, as the opening credits begin to roll in our short story, we begin to make out that it is a bit of a ramshackle farm that seems to be in the middle of this seemingly undetectable desert wasteland. Until eventually we begin to hear the sound of a bell being rung. The camera then cuts, and we see one of those old metal triangles. It's all rusted and everything like that. And there's the metal wand that's being, rattled between all the 3 rungs of this triangle. And as we pull back, we begin to see Lou. Not much of him, because he has a giant handkerchief over his face to keep the dust out of his nose and his lungs. But we can see, and he's got, an old battered cowboy hat that he has to keep one hand on. There is a strap tied tightly around his chin, but the wind of the sandstorm is blowing so heavily that even then he still has to maintain a hand on the hat. He's basically wearing jeans overalls and kind of an old checkered shirt. And as Lou goes and he walks away over from the bell, he begins to look up and he approaches a fence and he kind of leans up over towards it. And that's when we can actually begin to hear the sound of cows coming forward. And the camera cuts to, a point of view of Lou. And sure enough, slowly approaching through the sandstorm is we see a herd of cattle that's moving forward. And it's at this point that we see that they actually are moving over towards a barn. A very, very large, significant barn that looks like it was actually built by about, 50 men. It's larger than the house that Lou actually calls home. And as Lou basically goes and follows along and he walks inside, we then begin to see inside the barn where the wind continues to rattle against the boards of the barn. But inside it is very grassy. And this is actually where Lou does the majority of his farming. He calls the cattle in so that they can feed, which is regulated over a very specific period of time to make sure that they don't eat too much of the grass so that it's not able to regrow again. And as we look around inside this barn and the camera kind of begins to do like a 360-degree pan, with Lou in the shot the entire time, in the background behind him, we can see just the plant life and the fertilizers and the seeds and everything else that he has going here. That this is an indoor farm area that he has built in the middle of this desert shithole that he calls home. And the cows, sure enough, they come inside, and once the last one of them comes in, Lou goes over, he closes the barn doors, and he shuts them, and the cattle then begin to graze. So it's with that I am now going to pass it over to Lou to provide us with the first description of the scene.
Well, so he bars the door.
So, first of all, actually, let me know which of your potentials you're going to use for this description.
Patience.
Okay.
He's going to bar the door, of course, and kind of turn around and take off his storm clothing, we'll call it, and it reveals a tired-looking man who nervously looks along the herd and is looking for inconsistencies in the grass, something that might be overgrazed or something not be. He puts an object over it,
okay,
to make sure the cows don't overgraze on it.
Okay.
He looks around one last time, and he checks a small locket he has with a small sepia picture of what looks to be three very skinny, very malnourished looking people that he might call family. He closes it and then looks back to the herd, hopefully. Okay.
Now, within those, you provided 2 details because that's what's available with your particular potential of patience.
Okay.
And so with that, that was the description you provided. Sure. So I'm going to provide the outcome to that.
Okay.
As the locket closes and Lou looks over at the cattle that are grazing, and really in essence, there's really only about a couple of dozen or so cattle.
Not too much.
Yeah. And there's a couple of calves that are kind of milling about, trying to stick close to their mothers. Right. And Lou has a smile on kind of like his grizzled old face. And it's at this point that we can really kind of see, his age and the wisdom in his years. He's got crow's feet next to his eyes. He even has what looks like a couple of old scars. Very hard to distinguish what those might possibly be.
Could be just windburn, could be bullet wounds.
Exactly. In an environment like this, it looks as if like he has definitely led a very, tough life surviving out here. Right. And it's at this point that we then see Lou kind of starts moving around and starts, patting some of the cattle on the back and everything. And it's at this point that Lou stops and begins to take a look. And then we watch Lou as he begins to count. This, and then suddenly realizes that he's one short. And then to which he turns over towards the barn and looks at the doors that are closed as the barn doors are rattling with little bits of the sand from the storm that's outside, just kind of, blowing little puffs of dust into the room. So that was the outcome to your description.
Sure.
Now, in this particular case, because Lou is the only character that's in the scene, we're basically just going to go back and forth. So you go ahead and provide a description again, because I have no characters introduced yet. So you go ahead, give me whatever potential you're going to use for your next description.
It could be patience as well. It's hard working out on the frontier.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So my 2 details would be Lou notices that with the cracks and the all sorts of sand blowing in from the front of the door, that one of his cows are probably missing. He counted, turned back towards the door, unlatches the door, puts his hat back on and his mask back on, and starts to trudge out back into the store.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I would say that's just one detail.
One detail.
So go ahead and embellish that with one more detail.
Okay. So he is going to carefully, as he knows growing up in Hunan, to survey through the storm as much as possible to try and find the lost calf that has been, slow to come in or might not be around right now. Mm-hmm. So how would I do that?
Well, at this point, it comes down to there really is no success or failure when it comes to anything in High Plains Samurai. So it's simply a matter of whatever it is that you feel your character should find to help move the story along simply happens. It's only when someone else tries to complicate something that you don't want to happen that dice will get rolled.
Okay.
So it's simply a matter of, whatever element you feel best suits the story, just simply bring it in.
Okay. So he looks around for a quick second and starts trudging off into the massive storm now that is blowing and buffeting. His jeans look like they've seen better days, and he trudges through almost shin-deep blowing sand. And he starts to make out a figure standing next to where he used to keep his old well, we'll call it. And he looks hopeful for a second as he thinks that, hey, this is actually much easier than I thought it'd be. Find the calf, get back in, drink some whiskey. Why not? But as he gets closer, it's not a calf. It's a human of some sort, kneeling next to the wall drinking.
Ooh, all right. Let me give you an outcome for that. We cut to a close shot that shows this figure, who is now revealed to be a very kind of short and scrawny young woman who is actually hunched over, and sure enough, she's actually kind of got the bucket from the well, and she's actually just slurping it up as much as possible. And as the sand is blowing over onto her face, it's kind of making things very muddy. But you can tell because, that she's used to enduring out in these elements. Because instead of wearing, goggles of some kind, they're very much exactly what you would see someone in the Arctic wearing. In that they're just almost like metal sunglasses with just a tiny thin little strip that's in the middle of them, to keep the sand out of her eyes and still be able to see without squinting. And she goes and takes, like a sip of this and then, this. And then it's this point that she stops and looks. And we see from a point of view of her through these tiny little slits that there is a lone figure, the person who more than likely owns this property, standing there, staring at her. We then cut back to see her face again, and she has, like kind of a big grin on her face. We also see now, because she's got a hood and everything drawn over her head, she kind of pulls it back a little bit, and she's got a purple mohawk, and it just kind of runs almost right down along the side, and actually goes down and underneath, the cloak and clothing and everything that she's wearing. She then kind of stops, and a big, almost semi, tooth-filled grin comes over her face, and she just goes and gives 2 middle fingers, and then it's at this point, she is suddenly gone. Has disappeared into thin air.
Hi, this is Jason from The Gauntlet. If you enjoyed this episode of Comic Strip AP, be sure to check out our YouTube channel. We have many other Comic Strip AP shows available, each organized in their own sequential playlist for easy listening. Just go to youtube.com and search for Gauntlet RPG.